They said the Templars found nothing. Yet they returned from Jerusalem changed, wealthier, and suddenly untouchable. Did they uncover ancient scrolls revealing a sacred bloodline? Or perhaps a portal guarded by symbols only they understood? What truth lay behind the sealed stone door beneath Solomon's temple, and why did the church try to erase it? They arrived in Jerusalem with no army, no treasure, and no titles. Yet within a few years, the Templars had gained access to the most sacred ground in the city, directly above the ruins of Solomon's temple, while others prayed or fought in the streets. The Knights asked to live on the Temple Mount itself, beneath what locals called the Dome of the Rock. They claimed their mission was to protect Christian pilgrims, but their true work began below the surface. At night, the ground trembled softly as stones shifted and ropes lowered tools into long sealed cavities. Their first mission was not battle, it was excavation. And soon, rumors began to spread. Whispers told of a door underground, not made of wood or iron, but of polished stone, carved with a strange seal, and locked with no key. Why would knights sworn to poverty dig beneath a shrine unless they believed something was hidden there? Some early Arabic accounts mention the Franj, foreign knights who labored silently beneath the mount, avoiding attention. They were seen carrying maps, asking about tunnels, and studying ancient texts no other Western soldiers seemed to care about. Locals claimed they unearthed a collapsed staircase leading to a hallway thick with dust and silence. At its end lay what appeared to be a sealed chamber, its entrance marked by a seven-sided star and a pattern of lines no one could explain. Could the Templars have discovered an untouched vault older than the temple ruins themselves? Some believe they opened it in secret and removed objects never seen again. The Temple of Solomon, according to Scripture, once held the Ark of the Covenant, built with divine measurements. If a hidden chamber survived from that time, what might it contain? Scrolls, relics, or something more dangerous? Some theorists suggest the Templars found writings left by priests who fled during the Babylonian siege. Texts describing not just rituals, but the geometry of sacred sound, light, and structure. Did the Templars learn to read these codes, or carry them west to be deciphered in silence? No records survive from the Templars' 9 years in Jerusalem. Nothing explains what they found, who they met, or what was moved. Yet after their return, everything changed. From obscurity they rose to become one of the most powerful orders in Christendom, granted privileges by popes, lands by kings, and immunity from nearly every law. How could a handful of knights rise so swiftly unless they returned with something more than experience? Could their power have come from a discovery buried for centuries beneath Solomon's temple? Later accounts mention a black tablet taken from the east and hidden in a Templar priory in France. It was said to be covered in symbols written in a language not seen since Babel, one depicting a star locked in a circle, another an arch of flame pointing downward. These same shapes appear in the stained glass of Templar chapels and the floor plans of cathedrals. Could those buildings themselves be coded blueprints, architectural echoes of what was found below the Temple Mount? Scholars still debate whether the Templars' fascination with Solomon's temple was symbolic or literal. Yet if their rituals, symbols, and architecture all changed after Jerusalem, the pattern is hard to dismiss. What kind of chamber required such secrecy? What kind of knowledge was so dangerous it had to be sealed in stone, not written on parchment? Some say the vault was not merely a hiding place, but a warning. A sealed room built to contain ideas that once threatened kings and priests alike. Legend tells of one Templar who led the dig but never spoke again. He entered a monastery and took a vow of silence until his death. Another vanished on the voyage home, said to have carried a scroll wrapped in black cloth. Neither the man nor the scroll was ever seen again. Could this be why no records survive? Were the knights sworn to silence not by oath, but by fear of what they had uncovered? Modern ground scans of the Temple Mount reveal cavities beneath the surface, some natural, others unmistakably carved, with walls too straight and corners too precise. Yet due to religious and political tension, no excavations are permitted. Whatever lies below remains untouched, locked under centuries of stone and secrecy. Still, the symbols endure, etched on tombs, carved into chapels, drawn in manuscripts, as if the memory of that sealed chamber refuses to be erased. Could the door they found have led to more than a room? Could it have opened into an idea, a forbidden truth about kingship, religion, or even the origin of humanity itself? Why did so many later brotherhoods, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the secret societies of Europe, trace their lineage back to the Templars' time in Jerusalem? Was it myth, or the survival of a secret passed hand to hand, hidden in plain sight? The true record of what happened beneath the temple was never written, but its shadow stretches across history. And perhaps, buried beneath those ancient stones, the truth still waits, sealed behind a door that was never meant to be opened. For nearly 9 years, 9 knights lived atop the most sacred ground in Jerusalem, and no one ever knew exactly why. They claimed to be poor, yet they moved with purpose. They preached no sermons, built no churches, and sought no followers. While the rest of the Crusader world was locked in war, carving borders and spilling blood, these 9 knights remained still, focused only on what lay beneath their feet. People watched them descend into the ruins of Solomon's temple with tools, maps, and devices that few had ever seen before. At night, the air near their quarters carried the dull echo of metal against stone, and strange murmurs in languages that even the priests could not recognize. What could have drawn them below ground for nearly a decade? What mission demands silence so absolute that even fellow crusaders were turned away? Some say these men weren't just digging, they were protecting. And whatever they uncovered in those depths may have reshaped the destiny of the Templar Order forever. Official records say almost nothing. The early chronicles of the Latin Kingdom mention the knights only in passing, as if their presence was of no importance. But that very absence speaks loudly. How does a military order survive for years with no battles, no victories, no record of action? History rarely leaves such blanks without reason. The few scattered accounts that survive describe sealed quarters, restricted access, and secret movements beneath the dome of the rock. Locals told stories of the knights lowering heavy crates into narrow shafts, measuring carved stones by candlelight, and whispering over parchment deep below the surface. Could it be that the original Templars were not simply warriors, but seekers of a truth buried beneath Jerusalem itself? In nearby villages, rumors took root. One tale speaks of a knight who emerged from the tunnels pale as ash, his eyes vacant, his voice gone. Another tells of a man seen washing a bronze scroll case in a spring outside the city before vanishing before dawn. Legends, perhaps, but legends that refuse to die. And in the study of secrets, the stories that endure often hold a fragment of truth. Some theorists believe the knights discovered something extraordinary, blueprints carved into the foundation stones, not maps of land but of geometry, sacred geometry that aligned the temple with the stars, revealing a forgotten order of the heavens. Others claim they found a hidden archive sealed after the first temple's fall, texts that challenged everything the church claimed to know about God, kingship, and creation itself. What could those writings have said? Did they describe the true wisdom of Solomon, his mastery over metals, spirits, and forces lost to time? Or perhaps they revealed a lineage the church could never allow to surface. Whatever the truth, something changed. When the 9 finally emerged and left Jerusalem, their order exploded in influence. New knights flocked to their banner, vast lands were donated, and the church blessed them in ways no other monastic brotherhood had ever known. Yet none of the founding 9 ever explained what had happened in those years below the temple. No relics were shown. No miracles declared. Only silence. Some say they had taken an oath to guard not an object, but an idea. That what they found demanded secrecy, because its revelation could shatter the faith they were sworn to protect. Maybe that's why their rules spoke so often of silence, light, and hidden knowledge, phrases that sound spiritual, but may have meant something far more literal. Later documents hint at a fracture among the 9. One account from a priory near Toulouse tells of a brother who fled east, burdened with knowledge he could not bear. The record says he carried a scroll sealed in bronze, tasked with taking it far from both church and king. Was he preserving something the others feared, or executing a plan that none dared speak aloud? Across Europe, a strange pattern began to appear. The first Gothic cathedrals shared hidden similarities, symbols carved beneath altars, labyrinths in their floors, and mathematical sequences that mirrored the dimensions of Solomon's temple. Some believe the original Templars encoded what they found into stone itself, spreading their discovery across cathedrals and sanctuaries, not as words, but as geometry, a message only the initiated could read. One detail often overlooked: not all 9 founders are accounted for. When the order grew in power, only 7 appeared in the records. One was said to have died in Jerusalem, though no grave was ever found. And the 9th? He vanished entirely. Some whisper he remained behind, chosen to guard what could never be moved. Others say he was consumed by madness, or by silence. Perhaps he alone held the final piece of a puzzle never meant to be solved. Even now, scholars argue whether the founding Templars found anything at all. But the pattern is impossible to ignore: 9 years of silence, followed by a surge of wealth, power, and favor no one could explain. Did they discover an artifact? The text? A truth buried so deep it threatened the foundations of faith itself? Sometimes, the greatest power lies not in revelation, but in restraint, in knowing exactly what must never be spoken. Long before modern excavations and politics sealed the site from exploration, whispers claimed that the Temple Mount rested atop structures far older than Solomon's temple, vaults, tunnels, and chambers arranged in patterns lost to history. Ancient writings across 3 faiths spoke of geometry beneath the stone platform, an architecture of divine proportion. And when the Templars arrived, for the first time in centuries, someone dared to search for it. They didn't dig blindly. Every strike of the pickaxe, every measured descent, seemed guided, as if following a design only a handful of men could read. Could there have been a hidden set of blueprints, buried, scattered, or encoded within scripture, that led the Templars to precise points beneath the Temple Mount? Ancient Jewish texts like the Mishnah speak of substructures once used by temple priests, secret chambers sealed by immense stone slabs, corridors measured to sacred ratios, tunnels aligned to celestial geometry. In Islamic lore, early accounts of the Haram al-Sharif mention buried pathways known to prophets but hidden from the faithful, one describing a spiraling descent leading to a sealed gate untouched since Solomon's reign. Why were such details preserved? Were they symbols of faith, or fragments of memory left as clues? By the time the Crusaders arrived, these accounts had faded into legend. Yet among scholars, mystics, and builders of the Holy Land, whispers of the original design endured. Hebrew scrolls spoke of cubit-based rooms no man had entered in centuries. Arab historians recorded changes in echo and vibration beneath the rock, signs of empty spaces and hidden hollows. Some even noted alignments between carved stone points and the constellations above, as though the temple's foundations were built not merely on earth, but in harmony with the heavens. Could the temple have been more than a house of worship? Was it a coded machine, an instrument built to mirror divine structure? If so, the Templars may have uncovered a design far greater than any relic. Centuries later, British excavations, Warren's Shaft, and later SMM surveys confirmed the presence of geometric cavities, conduits, and chambers carved with impossible precision. Their patterns revealed symmetry and intention. Strangely, those same proportions would reappear in early Masonic blueprints describing the double temple, a structure half above ground, half below, 2 reflections of a single sacred whole. Masonic tradition, claiming descent from Templar wisdom, treats this not as allegory but as fact. Could the Templars have been the first in centuries to rediscover this dual design? Surviving Templar diagrams repeat the same symbols: a square within a circle, twin pillars joined by a compass arc, spirals etched into stone margins. These were not idle ornaments. They looked like schematics, glyphs of architecture and energy. Scholars who've examined them believe they may encode mathematical instructions, capable of reproducing the temple's harmonic blueprint anywhere on Earth. Is that why, soon after their return, Europe saw the sudden rise of Gothic cathedrals, structures of impossible grace, filled with sacred geometry never before seen in the West? The Book of Kings describes side chambers carved for study and storage, built according to divine proportion. Some researchers suggest these rooms could amplify resonance, architectural spaces designed to manipulate sound. Modern acoustics confirms that certain geometric shapes can magnify frequencies naturally. Could the ancients have known this and encoded it in the bedrock itself? If Solomon's temple was more than stone, if it was a resonance chamber crafted to attune the human soul, then the Templars may have found not treasure, but technology of spirit. And that discovery would explain their silence. Islamic writings too speak of what lies below, the well of souls, said to echo with the voices of prophets. Some call it myth. Others believe it describes a real chamber where sound bends and memory stirs. A surviving Templar journal from the early 1200s speaks cryptically of a deep place where the voice bends and the heart remembers. Was this poetry, or a record of something they witnessed underground? Perhaps those strange acoustics shaped the order's later devotion to silence, to light, to geometry. When the Templars returned to Europe, their architecture changed forever. Churches built in their wake bore labyrinths in their floors, rose windows with 12-point symmetry, and crypts aligned to the rising sun on sacred days. These features mirrored blueprints once found in rabbinic commentaries and ancient temple manuscripts. Could the Templars have encoded the temple structure into European cathedrals, preserving its design in stone, hidden in plain sight? The Church never confirmed it, but it never denied it either. And silence, once again, speaks loudest. If they had found relics, they would have shown them. Instead, they returned with silence and a new kind of architecture. Perhaps that silence protected something far greater than gold or scripture. A sacred map, written in proportion and resonance, leading man closer to the divine. In the end, we are left with echoes, fragments of geometry, symbols carved into forgotten chapels, patterns whispering beneath centuries of stone. The surface of the Temple Mount tells one story. But deep below, beneath time and dust, another story waits. One the Templars may have read, memorized, and carried west. Brick by brick. Arch by arch hidden in plain sight. Because the greatest threat to any kingdom isn't a sword. It's a scroll. When the Templars descended into the veins of stone beneath the Temple Mount, they weren't searching for gold, relics, or visible treasure. They were after something older, older than kings, older than empires. Whispers across the centuries say they uncovered a chamber sealed since Solomon's days. Its air untouched, its contents preserved in silence. But what lay within was no treasure as most imagine. Some say the chamber held dozens of scrolls, wrapped in brittle leather, arranged with the care of a sacred archive. Not scriptures known to the Church. Not copies of the laws everyone had read. These were older, possibly written before the Bible was conceived. Could the Knights have discovered writings left by Solomon's hidden scribes, or a priesthood that predated him entirely? And if so, what knowledge would need to be buried for generations in silence? Jewish, Islamic, and Eastern Christian texts hint at such scrolls. The Talmud references writings sealed beneath the temple in stone niches. Scholars in later centuries suggested that these included records of a forgotten priesthood, keepers of language, measurement, and spiritual law long erased from public memory. Legend claims Solomon feared misuse and instructed scribes to encode their work in codes, then bury it deep within stone. Could the Templars have found that cache during their years of secret excavation? Arabic chroniclers from the Ubaid rule describe Frankish knights hauling away strange cylindrical containers by night. One spoke of books that burned no fire yet lit the eye. Across multiple accounts, the details echo. Could these be records of that silent removal, the forbidden words carried from the heart of Jerusalem? Where did the scrolls go? Some say they traveled west through Antioch and Cyprus, hidden in southern France. Others claim they were copied, translated, and passed in secret to inner circles of the order. By the time the Templars rose to fame in Europe, their churches spoke a different language, round buildings reflecting sacred geometry, rituals unapproved by popes, coded messages embedded in architecture. Could all this have come from what they read, something the world was never meant to see? Some researchers argue the scrolls described not just spiritual laws, but practical knowledge disguised as prophecy. Proportions tied to resonance. Sound harmonics linked to structure. Materials and forms aligned to amplify energy in ways medieval eyes could not comprehend. Such knowledge could be labeled sorcery. Could that explain their silence? Inquisition records from the Templars' trials report men speaking of words that turned stone to light, of parchments that sang when touched, hummed near altars. Most dismissed these as madness under torture. But could the scrolls have contained instructions to manipulate sound and light in ways not yet fully understood? Or were the knights struggling to convey a technology their words could not hold? A few fragments survive in obscure archives. Geometric diagrams without labels, texts in a hybrid of Aramaic and an older, perhaps lost dialect, possibly Proto-Sumerian. Authenticity remains debated, yet they align with the centuries-old rumors. Theories suggest the scrolls recorded pre-deluge lineages of kings and teachers, names absent from the Old Testament. Others argue they were cosmological guides, charts of stars, alignments, cycles repeating over millennia. Were they warning of cosmic resets? Some link Templar art across France and England to comets, eclipses, and celestial patterns. Were the knights following a calendar not of seasons, but of cataclysmic cycles? There is no physical proof today. No museum, no church holds the scrolls. Perhaps that is the point. Their knowledge was not meant to be displayed, only preserved. Guardians of the order encoded it in stone. Churches, labyrinths, stained glass, ritual gestures. Even if the scrolls vanished, their wisdom survived. And yet, what became of the originals? Burned? Buried beneath a chapel? Or still hidden, locked in silence, awaiting a time when the world could comprehend them? If ever uncovered, how would faiths react? Confirmed or destroyed? Some theories go further. Among the most explosive is the idea that the scrolls recorded bloodlines, a genealogy traced through King David, past Solomon, into a lineage too dangerous to name in medieval Europe. Jesus, not myth, but part of a preserved bloodline. If true, this secret could shatter church authority, destabilize thrones claiming divine right. Could this have been the truth the Templars died protecting? And if so, where did the lineage go after the order fell? The notion of a sacred, living line of kings is not new. But the possibility that the Templars held proof, parchments, names, family trees copied from ancient records, lends this theory unprecedented weight. The order's silence, their rituals, their coded architecture, all might have been a single, centuries-long act of guardianship. They didn't preach. They didn't publish. They moved like men carrying a secret no sword or crown could challenge. Something invisible, yet powerful, gave them access to corridors of influence no other order had ever walked. The transformation was quiet but unstoppable. Within a few years of returning from Jerusalem, papal endorsements arrived. They traveled freely across borders, collected tithes, built chapels, answered to no bishop. Why would the Vatican, known for tightly controlling power, allow such freedoms? Some scholars believe the answer is simple. The Templars had uncovered something the Church could not ignore. Was it proof of an alternate Christian lineage? Ancient pre-biblical scrolls? Or esoteric knowledge that threatened established theology? Whatever it was, it gave the Templars leverage. Protection or containment, the result was the same. Sudden influence, wealth, and power beyond their rank. Land donations poured in. Estates spread across France, England, Spain, and beyond. Pilgrims entrusted them with savings. Merchants used them as banks. Kings borrowed, then feared them. And at the center of it all, some argue, was not gold, nor relics, nor even holy texts. It was blood, a hidden line, a lineage that traced back through David and Solomon, possibly all the way to Jesus. Not legend, not metaphor, but living inheritance, safeguarded by the knights who knew the world was not yet ready. Evidence appears in cryptic symbols etched into Templar churches, vines curling around columns, 12-pointed stars, twin guardians flanking a child. Could these have been coded messages pointing to heirs of the line? The Inquisition records hint at whispers under torture. He walks among us. He carries the sign. These words were treated as blasphemy, but perhaps they were truth, hidden in plain sight. France, England, Portugal, everywhere the Templars established strongholds, signs appear, secret chambers, encoded floor patterns, inscriptions of light and seed, stars and vines. Some historians dismiss these as mere art or coincidence. But what if they were a network, a living map of guardianship across Europe? The Priory of Schaun, a shadowy group later tied to legend, claimed to continue this mission, the protection of a royal bloodline. Over time, the Holy Grail myth emerged. But perhaps the Grail was never a chalice. Perhaps it was a person, a living heir, a descendant of kings, preserved in secrecy for centuries, guarded by those who had vowed silence under pain of death. If such a bloodline survives, it moves unseen, cloaked in anonymity, protected by ritual and secrecy. And if the Templars' sudden rise in power was the first step in safeguarding that line, then their actions, their architecture, and their silence were not anomalies. They were part of a deliberate, centuries-long mission. They rode back into France not as humble pilgrims, but as men transformed. Silent, powerful, untouchable. The poor knights who had departed Jerusalem with vows and rusted swords returned with influence, wealth, and secrets that reshaped history. The corridors of kings and popes bent to their steps, not because of arms or sermons, but because of knowledge hidden deep beneath the stones of the Temple Mount, a secret written not in ink, but in blood and encoded in stone. They didn't explain. Instead, fortresses, commanderies, and preceptories sprang up across Europe in geometrically precise patterns. Some say the layout itself held meaning, a sacred grid echoing the designs the Templars had uncovered beneath the Temple Mount. Were their lands more than strategic holdings? Were they mapping something, preserving a hidden blueprint? The commandery of Lover-Tuared in southern France offers a glimpse. Built in a remote area with few threats, it contains layers of underground vaults, hidden wells, and unusual symbols carved into its stone. Abbey records mention nocturnal processions, sealed bundles carried in silence. What were the knights transporting under the cover of night? Some suggest France became the new hiding place for sacred texts or relics too dangerous to leave in the Holy Land. The Templars also aligned themselves with unorthodox noble families, Catharists, Gnostic sympathizers, and suppressed Christian traditions. These alliances were ideological, not political. Shared symbols began appearing in Templar structures and allied strongholds, the cross petit, twin pillars, the eight-pointed star. Were these signs of a broader plan? Were they assembling allies who understood the weight of what they had discovered? Even their naval movements changed. Ships departing from ports like La Rochelle veered west into the Atlantic without explanation. Were they ferrying supplies, passengers, documents, or perhaps descendants tied to the bloodline they sought to protect? If the Holy Land was unsafe, the secrets had to be moved, quietly, carefully, beyond prying eyes. Their rituals shifted to initiation ceremonies became private, filled with coded language and veiled oaths. Chroniclers recorded phrases like, "He who speaks breaks the line," and described members folding into a hidden house. Was this mere poetic drama, or a method to transmit knowledge safely through generations? Each new knight may have received a fragment of a puzzle, a piece of truth meant to survive persecution. Financially, the order became untouchable. Their wealth was liquid, invisible, stored in trust and promises rather than gold. Kings, merchants, and pilgrims relied on them, granting access to the deepest networks of European society. But wealth was only a tool. If they carried knowledge that undermined church authority, even their silence was a form of leverage. Despite immense influence, the Templars rarely sought conversion or domination. They built, protected, and waited. Silence became their signature. No public declaration, no heresy, only a quiet, rising force that unsettled monarchs and popes alike. Could the Templars have returned to France not to boast, but to bury, not to reveal, but to prepare for something greater? The order was transformed. They were no longer mere warriors. They were guardians, carriers of a burden that made them untouchable and eventually irresistible targets. In less than a generation, a small band of knights became one of Europe's most powerful forces. Commanderies were hubs of influence, often sited near trade routes, ports, and political centers. Ledger books rivaled royal treasuries. Kings borrowed, estates were managed, entire financial systems ran through them. All done with such efficiency that most observers never realized they were witnessing the quiet birth of an empire. Could this network have been more than economic? Could it have been a replication of something first discovered beneath the Temple Mount? Their structures suggest a hidden plan. No public doctrine, yet extraordinary coordination across borders, languages, and monarchies. Papal privileges allowed them to move like ghosts, bypassing tolls, taxes, and laws. If not serving the church or kings, then who were they serving? Some historians propose a hidden charter, known only to the highest ranks, outlining a sacred mission. Advancement depended on skill, loyalty, and trust, not inheritance. Some private passages, never revealed, hint at secret instructions derived from Jerusalem. Their financial mastery added another layer of power. Lending and credit systems, unheard of in medieval Europe, allowed the Templars to track trade, troop movements, and political shifts. Could this have been intelligence gathered not for kings, but to protect their own mission? Even their architecture speaks. Circular churches mimic the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Hidden geometry and astronomical alignments appear in sites like Temple Church in London and Tomar in Portugal. These are not coincidences. The stones themselves seem to encode knowledge first uncovered in the secret veins beneath Solomon's temple. Were they embedding codes into stone? Was this architecture a silent language meant only for those who understood the plan? Even their shipyards, particularly in La Rochelle, operated outside standard oversight. Goods moved unmarked and unchecked. Vessels came and went irregularly, suggesting the Templars maintained their own fleet independent of any kingdom. Where were they going? What were they transporting? Some theorists claim they were building not just for defense, but for escape. A global system of safe houses, hidden vaults, and clandestine routes, ensuring that whatever sacred object or knowledge they guarded would survive betrayal. As their influence grew, the Templars began appearing in unexpected arenas, royal courts, trade negotiations, councils that redrew borders. Yet they never claimed political titles. They ruled not with crowns, but presence. An empire without flags, stronger because it remained invisible. A document from Aragon refers cryptically to the silent cross that bends the will of kings, perhaps a nod to the Templars' subtle power. Their silence became their shield, and their shield, their weapon. Even the church grew uneasy. Bishops complained of Templar arrogance. Monasteries resented exemptions from tithes. Yet the Pope continued to defend them. But what did the Templars possess that made even Rome hesitate? Some believe they held documents or relics so dangerous to the official narrative that silence became their bargaining chip. Others argue the Templars operated as two groups, one public, clad in armor, the other secret, steering the real mission from the shadows. Could this dual command explain inconsistencies in their behavior across regions? Their rise was unusual, almost rehearsed. When the fall finally came, they did not resist openly. They vanished from history like actors exiting a stage, leaving symbols, ruins, and questions. Were they defeated, or had the plan merely moved into a new phase? In the century after the Templars returned from Jerusalem, Europe's cathedrals began to stretch higher, bend light, and whisper through stone. Gothic architecture, with pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses, appeared almost overnight, with a precision that astonished scholars. Its roots, some claim, trace not to France alone, but to the secret knowledge brought from Jerusalem, a chamber beneath Solomon's temple containing plans, geometry, and encoded wisdom. Sacred geometry, the study of shapes, ratios, and angles as carriers of meaning, vibration, and power, may have been at the heart of this transformation. These new cathedrals were not just edifices, they were instruments. Spaces aligned with light, sound, and resonance, designed to focus energy and awaken perception. Labyrinths, rosettes, and symbols carved in Middle Eastern patterns appeared across floors, windows, and vaults. Could these be the messages encoded from the scrolls the Templars supposedly recovered? The vaults didn't merely support roofs. They guided force, sound, and spirit. Pilgrims described sensations of clarity, calm, or awakening, hinting at intentional design beyond aesthetics. The Templars, some argue, brought not wealth, but wisdom, a system of measuring and shaping space that had been buried beneath the temple for centuries. Perhaps the knowledge itself was older still, drawn from Egyptian, Sumerian, or pre-biblical traditions, bridging heaven and earth once more. Why did the church hesitate? Bishops resisted, calling the new style foreign, untrustworthy, even dangerous. Yet the buildings rose, funded by nobles tied to the Templars, men with sudden wealth and interest in sacred stonework and hidden symbolism. Construction was overseen in some regions by guilds practicing secret rituals whose marks later appear in Freemasonry. In every vault, every spiral, every hidden crypt, the Templars may have embedded fragments of their Jerusalem discoveries. Their legacy survives not in manuscripts or open records, but in stone, light, and shadow. The secret they carried was not just a treasure or a relic. It was a blueprint of influence, a method for bending the world quietly, invisibly, and enduringly. Could these guilds have been seeded by the Templars to quietly carry out the architectural mission long after the order's official fall? Perhaps the cathedrals, commanderies, and hidden chambers across Europe were part of a coordinated network, each structure a node in a living map of sacred knowledge. Consider the West Rose window at Chartres. Its design doesn't merely depict saints and biblical scenes. When analyzed, the pattern maps the 8-year cycle of Venus, a celestial rhythm supposedly forgotten by the medieval church. Why encode such cosmology in a Christian church? Was it homage to knowledge predating the Bible, or a signature of those who understood its origin? Many cathedrals were built atop older pagan sites, as if the Templars and their predecessors recognized the energy of the land itself. Lines of earth energy, or ley lines, intersect beneath these sacred locations. Were the Templars reviving a lost science of placement, material, and form, understanding that architecture could interact with the invisible forces of the earth? Vaults, arches, and crypts may have been designed not merely for structural strength, but to echo the heavens, reflecting cosmic order in stone. Each cathedral could have doubled as an initiation chamber, transmitting knowledge through light, sound, and geometry. Many masons left no names, their carvings playful yet deliberate, forming patterns only legible when seen collectively. Symbols like the vesica piscis, the flower of life, and the golden spiral recur across Europe. These shapes were chosen, preserved, and protected. They were not decoration but coded instruction. The Templars spoke through symbols, stars, keys, wheels, and chalices etched in stone, wood, and manuscripts. The 8-pointed star appears from Portugal to France, echoing ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian designs. Keys, often stylized and pointing into the earth, could indicate hidden chambers, vaults, or forbidden knowledge beneath the land. Pairings with chalices or serpents may represent levels of esoteric wisdom, a hierarchical language passed only to initiates. Circles, or Templar wheels, appear repeatedly on tombs, gates, and towers, sometimes 6 or 8-spoked. Were they marking cycles of time, celestial paths, or hidden locations? Could they encode maps, not of cities or roads, but of alignments between earth and sky, of energy and sacred geometry inherited from Jerusalem? Placement wasn't random. A star by the east gate, a key above a window, a wheel set in a floor. When mapped, these points form intricate geometric patterns mirroring ancient designs from the Temple Mount and Gothic cathedrals alike. Symbols also appear in manuscripts, hidden in margins, disguised as decorative flourishes. Letters circled, stars replacing punctuation, keys integrated into capital strokes, subtle instructions waiting for those able to read beyond ink. One French Templar site revealed a triangle with an eye at the center, interlocked rings, and curved lines behind a wooden altar, concealed until a fire exposed it centuries later. Labeled heretical, some scholars argue it mirrors ancient Jewish mystical diagrams describing the structure of reality itself. Waterways and wells often accompany Templar symbols. Were these markers of natural energy lines, sacred springs, or subterranean routes? Could Europe's hidden knowledge lie not only in stone, but beneath rivers, ponds and underground channels, vaults untouched for centuries? Some researchers propose that each Templar site formed a single part of a much larger symbol, a continent-wide network linking energy, geometry, and secrecy into a grand, silent plan. If true, then the Templars' legacy wasn't their wealth, their battles, or even their faith. It was the transmission of hidden knowledge, encoded in architecture, landscape, and symbol. A network designed to survive centuries of persecution, waiting for initiates to follow its language, and for the world to rediscover the truth hidden beneath stone, water, and sky. By the early 1300s, the Church's unease had reached a critical point. Papal records note whispers of an order that wielded influence far beyond its numbers, moving money, land, and information with uncanny efficiency. Kings envied them. Nobles depended on them. Yet no army could truly challenge them. What made the Templars untouchable wasn't their wealth, nor their swords, it was what they protected and understood. The Grail, in this context, was never a cup. It was a continuing chain of knowledge and lineage, a secret encoded in stone, symbol, and story. Inscriptions of vines, radiant circles, and spirals in Templar sites are not decorative. They map networks, relationships, and allegiances, perhaps even tracing the descendants of a sacred line back to David, Solomon, or even Jesus. These symbols spoke a quiet language, known only to those initiated into the order's deepest mysteries. Some historians suggest that when the Templars were arrested, tortured, and executed, their public influence was destroyed, but the secret remained alive. Families in France, Scotland, Portugal, and the Holy Land may have safeguarded heirs or texts. Monuments, cathedrals, and guilds became silent repositories, transmitting wisdom across generations. Freemasonry, Rosicrucian orders, and later secret societies could be interpreted as echoes of the Templars' mission, continuing to guard the Grail, not a cup, but a lineage, a truth, a map. The Grail's power lay in its invisibility. It could not be seized, counted, or displayed. It existed in continuity, in guardianship, in coded architecture, and in the oaths of those who understood the weight of what was discovered beneath the Temple Mount. Each cathedral, each labyrinth, each star-carved rose window was a lesson in restraint, geometry, and memory, a living reminder that some truths could only survive in silence. The Templars' rise and fall, their sudden disappearance from the historical stage, and the silence that followed may all have been intentional, part of a centuries-long plan to ensure that the Grail's legacy endured without exposure. The true prize was not gold, nor relic, but the preservation of a secret capable of reshaping power itself. And so, as medieval Europe moved on, as kings, popes, and armies rose and fell, the Templars' work quietly persisted in stone, manuscript, and hidden passage. They became immortal not as warriors, but as custodians. The Grail was never lost. It was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be kept, understood by the few, and preserved for the moment when the world might finally be ready to see it. In this light, every pointed arch, every vaulted crypt, every symbol etched in stone is more than architecture. It is a message from the past, a whisper of guardianship and knowledge that spans centuries. And for those who can read it, it still speaks. The charges were broad, vague, and deliberately damning: heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, secret worship, and the denial of Christ. Yet, as the knights were interrogated, tortured, and forced to confess, inconsistencies appeared. Many repeated the same phrases: "He who speaks breaks the line. The secret is older than the cross. The one we guard lives still." Words that sounded like madness to the inquisitors, but to insiders hinted at a legacy far beyond gold or relics. Templars confessed under pain, yet refused to reveal details about the hidden lineage or the veins beneath the Temple Mount. The inquisitors seized libraries, vaults, and manuscripts, but found only fragments of what the knights had carried across continents. No Grail, no royal bloodline, no complete blueprint, only hints embedded in geometry, allegory, and coded language. King Philip IV publicly celebrated the fall as a triumph of church and crown. Yet behind the scenes, whispers persisted. Many Templars had vanished, fleeing to distant lands or going underground. In Portugal, Scotland, and Cyprus, their influence quietly survived. Commanderies once bustling with knights became quiet havens, preserving manuscripts, symbols, and secrets. The order had been crushed in public, but its mission endured in shadow. Over time, new organizations arose, often claiming mystical lineage or claiming knowledge of the old ways. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and other secret societies incorporated symbols, rituals, and architectural principles that mirrored Templar codes. The eight-pointed star, labyrinths, spirals, vesica piscis, and hidden celestial alignments. Could these groups have been the Templars' heirs, continuing the work of guardianship centuries later? Even today, the legacy lingers in stone and story. Gothic cathedrals still stand aligned with stars and solstices. Symbols once dismissed as decorative now reveal patterns, maps, and warnings. Scrolls and codices, thought lost, may exist hidden in plain sight, encoded in churches, castles, or private libraries. The Templars' downfall did not erase what they had learned. It shifted it into silence, ensuring that only the initiated could continue their work. Their story is not one of defeat, but of transformation, an empire of knowledge and guardianship surviving invisibly beneath the surface of history. And so the question remains, what exactly did they find beneath the Temple Mount? Was it a secret bloodline, a sacred geometry of creation, an archive of ancient wisdom, or all three? And most importantly, who today carries the torch they once bore in silence? The ships vanished into the Atlantic night, leaving no trace beyond whispers and the creaking of masts in the wind. Some chroniclers suggested they sailed for the western coasts of Ireland or Scotland, where sympathetic clans and exiled nobles offered refuge. Others claimed the vessels crossed the Mediterranean, stopping in Portugal or even the Canary Islands, places removed from papal eyes. What mattered most wasn't the route. They were carrying seeds of knowledge, fragments of a legacy older than kings, encoded in scrolls, manuscripts, and the symbols etched on sacred stones. In the years that followed, the scattered Templars became shadows in European history. They resurfaced as advisors to monarchs, master masons in cathedral workshops, navigators of secret trade routes, and guardians of esoteric knowledge. Symbols once carved in Templar commanderies reappeared in remote monasteries, encoded in manuscripts, and etched into noble estates. The order's mission persisted, invisible to the world but alive in pattern and memory. The Church attempted to stamp out the order entirely, yet even the most brutal inquisitions could not erase what had been carried out under cover of night. Some scrolls survived in hidden vaults, some were copied and dispersed, and some may have been entrusted to families sworn to secrecy. Each fragment held instructions, genealogical records, or geometric knowledge, the blueprint of a wisdom the world had been deemed unready to see. Centuries later, researchers would notice patterns repeating across Europe. Gothic cathedrals aligned with solstices, labyrinths carved into stone floors, stars and spirals hidden in sacred architecture. Secret societies like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians echoed Templar symbols and rituals, often unaware that they were inheriting a continuity of guardianship dating back to Jerusalem. The disappearance of the Templar fleet, the burning of Grandmaster Jacques de Molay, and the public humiliation of the order were all calculated distractions. Behind the veil of defeat, the real Templar victory was subtle, the survival of their knowledge, their codes, and perhaps the secret lineages they swore to protect. To this day, the question lingers. What exactly was carried on those ships? Scrolls from Solomon's temple? Records of a sacred bloodline? Diagrams of divine geometry? Or knowledge so potent that the world itself would tremble if it were ever revealed? Whoever holds those truths now, wherever they reside, they are the inheritors of a mission that has endured in silence, in shadow, and in stone. And so the Templar story doesn't end in fire or exile. It continues in echoes, in hidden marks, in symbols, and in the possibility that some truths are meant to outlast even kings and popes. The French authorities came too late. The docks were empty, the warehouses swept clean, the witnesses vanished like smoke. No punishments were issued, no ships ever recovered. Historians still argue where that lost fleet went. Some say west, to the British Isles or the misty edges of the Scottish coast, where loyal clans waited with open harbors. Others insist the ships slipped south toward Portugal, where the order would quietly rise again under another name. But a smaller, stubborn theory whispers something wilder, that one or more vessels crossed the Atlantic centuries before Columbus ever dreamed of it. Could that be why some Native American petroglyphs bear crosses eerily similar to Templar marks? Or how a carved stone with a Templar emblem ended up buried deep in Nova Scotia's soil? Coincidence? Or the final stop of an escape route designed not just to save men, but a legacy the Church could never reach? Some letters hint the cargo was more than scrolls. One, recovered years later from a noble house in Limoges, speaks of a sealed chest of glass and ash guarded by 3 knights who refused to sleep apart from it. What could demand that kind of vigilance? Could it have been a relic from the First Temple, something that proved the bloodline theories, or revealed the sacred geometries said to link creation itself? Another theory claims the ships carried people, scholars, children, perhaps descendants of a holy line smuggled into the night to preserve the very blood the Templars had sworn to protect. If that's true, it changes everything. The fleet wasn't just fleeing, it was relocating the heart of a secret, preparing for the day when that knowledge could safely return. Maybe that's why so many Grail legends speak of knights crossing the sea with a hidden treasure. Could those tales be veiled memories of this very event? The timing certainly wasn't chaos, it was choreography. The arrests and the departures were both planned. Someone had tipped them off. There must have been an inner circle, men chosen to safeguard what had been unearthed in Jerusalem, who chose the fleet's course not to save themselves, but to save what they carried. The interrogators never found a single trace of that cargo. Vaults were emptied, strongholds ransacked, knights tortured, but none could reveal what they no longer possessed. Whatever they'd taken, it was already gone. And maybe that's why centuries later, the same symbols and teachings resurface. In Masonic halls, in cathedral blueprints, and in cryptic manuscripts scholars still struggle to decode. Maybe the fleet's real treasure wasn't gold or relics, but continuity. A line of teaching passed from ancient courts through Solomon's scribes, then to the Templars, and finally hidden from the Church beneath sails that slipped over the horizon. Later, Masonic texts would speak of brothers who crossed the deep waters bearing the flame. A poetic phrase, perhaps, but could it be literal? Could the fire first kindled beneath the Temple Mount have survived the Inquisition not in vaults or scrolls, but in motion, carried across the sea? If so, that vanished fleet might be the most successful secret in Templar history, not lost but moved. Wherever those ships landed, whether in the silent coves of Scotland, the fog-bound shores of the Americas, or the hidden bays of Iberia, they carried more than documents. They carried a seed, something larger still unfolding. Maybe the Church and Crown were never chasing the Templars. Maybe they were always too late. Because by the time the hammers struck the temple doors, the plan had already sailed. When the smoke cleared and the prisons filled, the world believed the Templars were gone. But shadows still moved where the records went silent. Some brothers escaped the Friday raids, warned by whispers and watchful eyes. They weren't just warriors, they were scribes, mapmakers, engineers, and keepers of the oldest knowledge the order possessed. Among them, it said, was a map unlike any other, not drawn with roads or rivers, but with stars, geometry, and ratios from the temple itself. It didn't point to treasure. It pointed to something meant to be rebuilt. Legends from southern France and northern Spain tell of cloaked men gathering by moonlight, comparing scrolls marked with strange symbols and impossible angles. These weren't maps of land, they were maps of meaning. Blueprints that tied sacred sites to constellations, as if the Templars believed the earth itself was meant to mirror the heavens. Were they searching for such a place, or building one? A suppressed manuscript found in Aragon speaks of travelers of the temple who followed the house of Orion and measured from the base of wisdom. No scripture holds such words. But astronomers recognize the pattern. It matches the alignment of stars to the ancient Temple Mount. Were the Templars constructing a new temple, or trying to restore the lost symmetry between heaven and earth? In Portugal and Scotland, where the Church's reach had weakened, survivors began building with uncanny precision. Chapels appeared whose layouts echoed the biblical temple's proportions. Some aligned perfectly with the stars, visible only on specific nights of the year. Why such deliberate secrecy in design? Could it be that these were more than places of worship? That they were instruments of time? That the maps didn't just tell where, but when something was meant to unfold? Across Europe, the same symbols resurfaced: 8-pointed stars, interlocking circles, keyhole arches. Not decorations, but signatures. Patterns matching Babylonian star charts and Egyptian temple ratios. How did they know these things? Were they drawing from the same scrolls smuggled out of Jerusalem, texts older than scripture, guarded by Solomon's scribes and preserved by the Templars? Some believe the survivors learned something the church never did, something that wasn't meant to be preached, but protected. That sacred knowledge wasn't about walls. It was about alignment, resonance, placement. Rebuilding a temple wasn't reconstructing stone. It was harmonizing with the natural and cosmic order. Perhaps that's why the Templars risked everything to protect the map, not to safeguard treasure, but to safeguard a plan, a design spanning continents and centuries. One compelling clue leads to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Built long after the arrests, it bears carvings that echo Masonic symbols and ancient Hebrew patterns. Its columns recall the two great pillars of Solomon's temple, Jachin and Boaz. Some researchers believe the chapel encodes not scripture alone, but a code of vibration, sound, and sacred proportion. Could Rosslyn have been constructed using knowledge carried from the vanished fleet? And if so, was it one node in a network of sites mapped by the stars and seeded with intention? The precision continues in measurement. Early Templar-related buildings across Europe consistently used the cubit, a unit tied to both Hebrew and Egyptian systems, despite its absence in regional standards. Coincidence? Or deliberate continuity? Perhaps the map didn't only mark places, it provided the tools to interpret them. Portuguese Templar descendants tell stories of a map that sings, a scroll whose markings reveal their meaning only under starlight or when certain conditions align. Though no such artifact has survived, the legend captures an ancient principle, the harmony of sound, number, and space, found in Pythagorean thought and Jewish mysticism alike. Could the Templars have fused these traditions into a hybrid science? If so, the map wasn't a relic, it was a blueprint for awakening. A chapel here, a gate there, axes where ley lines cross. Researchers tracing Templar sites across Europe have found uncanny alignments, some along pilgrimage routes predating Christianity. Could these be remnants of an older grid? And were the Templars reconnecting it? If survivors believed the old temple must return, not in Jerusalem, but dispersed and encoded, the map wasn't about escape. It was restoration. Planting, building, preserving, waiting for a world ready to understand what had been lost. Their work became architectural, symbolic, quietly revolutionary. Even today, echoes of this hidden geometry appear in rose windows, floor tiles, and silent axes pointing to the stars. Perhaps the question isn't whether the map existed, it's whether we've been walking its paths all along, unaware that the ground beneath us carries a design drawn by those who once knelt in the dust of a ruined temple, determined to carry its light forward in secret. Outside Edinburgh, a small chapel sits wrapped in centuries of stone and silence. Rosslyn Chapel, built in the mid-15th century, looks like a place of worship, but it feels different. Every surface hums with symbols. Every arch whispers secrets. Angels play instruments unseen. Flowers bloom from pillars that touch no soil. Frozen in the walls are patterns, codes, and geometry that have baffled scholars for over 500 years. Many believe this chapel preserves the last echo of a vanished order. Could Rosslyn be the final expression of Templar knowledge, hidden in plain sight? And if so, what message was being sent through stone and silent mathematics? The chapel was commissioned by Sir William Sinclair, a noble tied to Scottish Templars and rumored Freemason connections. Historians marvel at how one man could create such a place, rich in symbolism, astronomically aligned, and brimming with mysteries far older than Christianity. Some suggest Sinclair didn't invent the design, but inherited it from survivors who carried not only relics but a system of sacred knowledge. Could it have originated in Solomon's temple, preserved through secret scrolls, and transmitted by generations of builders using stone as scripture? Roslin's layout mirrors descriptions of Solomon's temple. The two great pillars resemble Jachin and Boaz, the legendary columns flanking the sanctuary. Between them sits a raised area marked by an ornate cube, a pattern echoed in early Templar constructions across Europe. Coincidence, or deliberate recreation of sacred space? Perhaps the Templars sought to rebuild the holy site, not in Jerusalem, but where it could remain beyond the church's reach. The symbolism grows deeper. Over 100 green men, faces of nature spirits, peek from the stonework, a pagan motif rarely found in Christian chapels. Musical cubes line the arches, allegedly forming a harmonic code. Some scholars claim the spacing matches soundwave patterns. Could Roslin have been designed to resonate, not just resemble Solomon's temple? Ancient texts suggest the original temple sang during certain rituals. Perhaps the Templars preserved that concept, encoding it into the chapel's hidden acoustics. The apprentice pillar, a spiraling column covered in vines, dragons, and ancient motifs, stands unlike any other. Some see the tree of life. Others see a DNA helix. Surrounding carvings resemble early maps, star alignments, and cube-shaped grids. Could this pillar be more than decoration? Could it mark where knowledge is hidden, or even how to activate it? One theory holds that Templars who fled to Scotland carried scrolls not only from Solomon's temple, but from Babylon, and perhaps even Levantine records of architectural principles designed to harmonize heaven and earth. Roslin Chapel may not just be a building. It could be a vessel, a codified archive of sacred science, a star-aligned key to a plan that began centuries before the stones were laid. If Roslin is the product of those hidden scrolls, then every carving, every spiral, every arch is part of a larger code. A code that doesn't just tell a story but enacts one. Some Freemasons believe Roslin is a working temple, a place where sacred geometry was not only remembered but practiced. The floor plan, measurements, and lighting all respond to solstices and equinoxes. Could Roslin be a map, a calendar, and a ritual space all at once? And was it intended to preserve the Templars' vision of what the Temple of Solomon once was, and what it could be again? Recent scanning technology has revealed hidden chambers beneath the chapel floor. Excavations have been halted or denied by the Sinclair family, who insist that disturbing the site would violate its sacred purpose. But what lies beneath? Some speculate it could hold relics smuggled from Jerusalem, or even the Grail itself, not as a cup, but as scrolls, records, or bones. Could this explain the chapel's precise siting on this ley line, with this mix of symbolism, orientation, and silence? Roslin's mystery lies not in what it shows, but in what it suggests. Somewhere along the journey from the Temple Mount to the Scottish hills, a group of exiled knights chose not to conquer with swords, but with stone. They left a puzzle not to confuse, but to preserve, a whisper etched in limestone for those who would someday see beyond the surface, to the science, prophecy, or knowledge hidden within. Today, Roslin stands as more than a chapel. It is a map, a voice, perhaps the last open page of a book the Church tried to close across Europe. The great Gothic cathedrals echo this same silent intelligence. From Chartres to Notre Dame, spires cut into the sky while foundations anchor hidden truths beneath the earth. Constructed over mere centuries, these stone giants contain knowledge far ahead of their time. Could their architects have carried designs inspired by the ruins of Solomon's temple? Chartres Cathedral, for example, was built without a nearby quarry and with no surviving plans. Yet its structure contains ratios matching ancient Hebrew texts and Egyptian measurements. Beneath its floor lies a massive labyrinth, said to mirror celestial orbits. Why place it in a Christian church? Why align its center with the setting sun on the equinox? Some researchers believe the answer lies in geometry as a sacred language. Builders encoded ratios tied to the golden mean, the same proportions found in DNA, sunflower spirals, and distant galaxies. Could this reflect a knowledge-seeking harmony between the divine and the physical, an architectural music inherited from ancient sources? Theories suggest that the Templars, returning from the Temple Mount, brought more than scrolls. They carried design principles aligned to cosmic balance. Across France, Spain, and England, these principles reappear with uncanny consistency. Floor plans resembling mandalas, vaults echoing the resonance of sung prayer, stained glass filtering light to align with zodiac patterns visible only at certain times of year. Were these aesthetic choices, or intentional triggers meant to awaken something deeper in the human mind? Even their placement seems deliberate. Cathedrals often align along ancient pilgrimage routes, forming networks that echo constellations and Babylonian star charts. Could these churches have been more than houses of worship, power stations, nodes in a sacred grid channeling energy across the land? This theory, sometimes called the Earth Grid hypothesis, proposes that ancient builders, including those linked to Solomon's Temple, understood how certain locations amplified resonance. By placing structures along these lines, they could create a network of influence, spiritual, scientific, and architectural. Could the Gothic cathedrals be the Christian continuation of this system, rooted in truths far older than Christianity itself? Notre Dame and Paris reveal this secret further. Its twin towers mirror Solomon's pillars. Its rose windows reflect sacred geometry, echoing the tree of life. Deep within its design is a sequence, 3, 7, 12, numbers resonating with Kabbalistic and Pythagorean principles. Could these be proof that knowledge brought from Jerusalem was encoded in every stone, every arch? And if so, who guided the builders? Many master masons remain unnamed. Some believe they were trained not only in stonecraft but in esoteric knowledge held by secret guilds, possibly Templar in origin. Signs of this hidden lineage remain: circles within squares, keys embedded in stars, carvings echoing motifs from Rosslyn and Templar maps. Some cathedral basements hold more than stone. Old records speak of crypts sealed with unfamiliar markings, altars without saints, chambers devoid of crosses. Were these spaces reserved for rites echoing the temple traditions of the ancient world, rituals harmonizing human voice, light, and place? The acoustics of these cathedrals offer another clue. Designed with precision, a whisper can travel across vast halls, or a single note can set walls vibrating. Could these structures, from Rosslyn to Chartres, have been instruments as much as temples? Maps, calendars, and keys to a knowledge too vast to speak aloud. And perhaps, in the silent stones and harmonic arches, the Templars' vision of Solomon's Temple lived on, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who knew how to read the language of geometry, light, and sound. Were these soaring cathedrals designed merely as concert halls for choir music? Or did their builders understand something far deeper about vibration and its power over human consciousness? Could sound, geometry, and sacred space have been deliberately woven together to open states of mind where insight becomes revelation? Some researchers now believe these churches weren't just places of worship at all, they were tuning devices. Structures built to align body, mind, and spirit through architecture alone. And if that's true, then the real Templar secrets were never written in books. They were carved into buildings, meant to be walked through, felt, and heard, not read. Could this be why, in later centuries, certain clergy began altering the great cathedrals, removing key sections, sealing chambers, changing layouts, and downplaying geometry's role? Was it a quiet attempt to erase the deeper purpose of these structures once the Templars were gone? Even today, standing inside Chartres or Reims, you can feel it. A strange stillness, a vibration in the silence, a hum that no architecture textbook can explain. Could that be the lingering echo of a knowledge once passed from Solomon's court to Templar hands, and from there, into the chisel of a mason shaping stone in the pale light of a French dawn? If the cathedrals are echoes of that lost science, then perhaps the next step isn't to search for hidden rooms, but to lustento the buildings themselves. They speak not in words, but in shape, sound, and light. And maybe, just maybe, they are the last living places on earth where Solomon's Temple still breathes. Because in the end, it wasn't the swords, or even the secrets buried beneath Jerusalem, that survived the fall of the Templars. It was the men who slipped away quietly after the flames died out, the ones who carried the knowledge forward. Whispers tell of another brotherhood that rose from the ashes. They wore no armor, rode no horses, and fought no wars. They moved like shadows, hidden in plain sight, within the very halls of power. They were called the Priory of Shaun. And while the world slept, they were said to guard something so dangerous, so world-altering, that kings, popes, and secret societies alike watched them in fear. Could this have been the true custodians of what the Templars found beneath the Temple Mount? And if so, who were they hiding it from? The first traces appeared in obscure French manuscripts and cryptic tomb engravings that defied official history. Symbols like the rose, the black sun, and the sealed chalice, appearing where they shouldn't have. Etched on church lintels, woven into noble crests, painted on monastery walls. Then, in the 20th century, a strange bundle of papers surfaced in the French National Library. Les Dossiers Secrets. Inside were lists of names: Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Isaac Newton, all labeled as grand masters of a hidden order. Most historians dismissed them as hoaxes. But deeper analysis revealed something unsettling. The symbols in those papers matched carvings in early Gothic churches, the same marks left by fleeing Templars, and signs found in crypts sealed since the Inquisition. Was it all an elaborate fabrication, or proof of a real brotherhood that had quietly shaped history for centuries? One theory claims the Priory of Shaun didn't appear after the Templars, it was born with them. A civilian branch, tasked not with battle, but with guarding something the church feared more than any weapon or relic. A bloodline. Could the true treasure uncovered beneath Solomon's temple have been a genealogy? One tracing from King David, through Jesus of Nazareth, and beyond? If that's true, then the Priory's mission wasn't to fight, but to protect a truth that could shatter both throne and altar. Hidden in plain sight, this brotherhood may have operated through families, quiet alliances, and coded messages only the initiated could read. In the hills of southern France, legends still tell of certain families who guarded ancient scrolls for generations, never shown, never explained. In their local churches, murals depict scenes that appear nowhere in Scripture. Mary Magdalene holding not a cup, but a scroll, or a chalice shaped unmistakably like a womb. Were these visual codes left by the Priory for those who still carried the blood or the knowledge? The mystery deepens in the small village of Rennes-le-Château. There, a 19th century priest named Berenger Saunière suddenly became impossibly wealthy. He renovated his chapel with strange symbols, Hebrew phrases, pentagrams, statues of Magdalene where the Virgin should stand. Beneath the altar, he built a hidden chamber. Where did the money come from? And what did he find beneath the church? Some say he discovered a coded document, possibly Templar, possibly Priory, that didn't reveal gold but truth. Could Rennes-le-Château have been a relay point, a hiding place in plain sight where sacred knowledge was preserved not through power, but through art and silence? Others believe the Priory's ideas bled into Freemasonry. That when the Templars fell, their legacy continued under new names, carried by architects, alchemists, and visionaries. The compass and square, the star within the circle, the rose within the cross. These might not just be symbols of craft, but fragments of a lost science passed from Jerusalem to Rosslyn, from Chartres to Paris. Perhaps the Priory's mission was never to keep the secret hidden, but to scatter it, piece by piece, across time, so only those who were ready could ever piece it back together. And the most unsettling theory of all? That the Priory guarded not relics or scrolls, but a living descendant. A bloodline that survived, protected and quietly woven into the veins of European nobility. Could a hidden heir still walk among us, unaware or unwilling, to awaken a truth that could rewrite all of history? Or was the bloodline always meant as metaphor, a spiritual legacy, guiding humanity in silence rather than through rule? The deeper one digs, the more the Priory of Shaun begins to look less like a secret society, and more like a living immune system of forbidden truth. Never attacking, always watching, ensuring that a single spark survives in a world determined to bury it. They didn't fight with swords. They fought with ideas, with art, music, architecture, and story. Their fingerprints may still rest on everything from Enlightenment philosophy to the birth of science itself. Because perhaps the real treasure of the Templars wasn't gold, relics, or blood. It was continuity. A flame passed hand to hand, century after century, still burning quietly, waiting for the world to be ready to see. Could their influence still ripple through the very institutions that look secular on the surface? In the end, one question lingers. Was the Priory of Shaun a myth, crafted to inspire awe and curiosity? Or was it a real, unbroken thread connecting Solomon's temple to Europe's cathedrals, the revolutions of knowledge, and the silent hands that shaped them from behind the curtain? If they still exist, their greatest accomplishment may be that they've never been found. Not because they disappeared, but because they were never meant to be seen. In the dim corners of forgotten monasteries and behind the sealed doors of ancient libraries, whispers persist, rumors of manuscripts that should not exist. Tales of books penned in languages no longer spoken, passed not from scholar to scholar, but from one sworn guardian to the next. These weren't ordinary scrolls or theological commentaries. They were records, texts said to have come from beneath Solomon's temple itself, smuggled away by the Templars before the world could destroy or weaponize them. While the Templars were hunted, tortured, and burned, their most dangerous possession wasn't gold or relics. It was knowledge, bound in codices wrapped in oilcloth, written in languages long extinct, protected not by locks or chains, but by oath. Could these books have survived centuries of fire, conquest, and suppression? And if so, who has them now? What truths might they still hold? One of the most persistent legends comes from southern Italy, where monks spoke of a mysterious book wrapped in red silk, too fragile to open, too sacred to destroy. Inside, it was said, were diagrams of temple blueprints, lunar calendars, and notes on a great mechanic who shaped the world through number, sound, and sacred space. No known faith claimed it. No historian could date it. Could this have been one of the original scrolls taken from beneath the Holy of Holies? Just one fragment among dozens, maybe hundreds, that vanished into secret collections as the Templars scattered across Europe? In Spain, rumors tell of a black leather volume that bled red at the edges. It bore no title, no author, no page numbers, only symbols. Circles within circles. Stars with uneven points. Grids that looked more like circuit boards than medieval design. A Jesuit scholar who reportedly examined it before it vanished described it as a library bound in a single voice, claiming that turning its pages felt like stepping into a current of power. What kind of text could shake a theologian to his core? Was it encoded to awaken something long dormant, some forgotten pattern of the human mind itself? Some researchers believe these manuscripts were deliberately scattered across Europe to keep them from falling into the hands of any single ruler or church. They point to cryptic Vatican footnotes, papal requests for books containing the keys of Solomon, or letters between bishops mentioning the red volumes of the temple line. Could these scattered hints reveal a secret network, one that preserved forbidden texts for centuries, updating and copying them by candlelight, waiting for a time when humanity might finally be ready to understand? And this isn't without precedent. The Dead Sea Scrolls, buried for millennia and discovered by chance, proved that entire libraries could be hidden away to outlast the empires that sought to burn them. What if the Templars did the same, not with desert caves, but with stone fortresses, abbeys, and mountain vaults? If so, where are they now? Some say the trail leads to Portugal, where Templar castles still guard hills untouched by modern wars. Others point to Switzerland, whose centuries of neutrality and secrecy would make it the perfect vault for private collections that can never see daylight. And then there's a stranger idea, that some manuscripts were never locked away at all. That they were hidden in plain sight. Coded into frescoes, carved into cathedral walls, woven into chants or musical scores, waiting to be heard, not read. Consider the Voynich manuscript, discovered in the early 1900s, still one of history's greatest enigmas. Written in an unknown script, filled with impossible plants, strange stars, and diagrams no one can decipher. It has defied every attempt at translation. Could it be one of those sealed texts, disguised as nonsense to all but those with the cipher? Or something even stranger? A living manuscript, one that reveals its meaning only under specific stars, or to a mind in the right state of awareness. One 17th-century Rosicrucian hinted as much, writing, The sealed books were never lost. They merely sleep, and when the stars return to their gate, the ink will speak again. Was that just poetry, or a literal reference to cosmic alignments encoded within the manuscripts themselves? Could the text be activated not by machines, but by resonance, geometry, light, and sound working together like keys in a lock? To most, these ideas sound far-fetched. Yet history shows how fiercely the church and monarchs hunted for Templar possessions, torturing men for years, desperate for something they could never seem to find. Unless what they sought couldn't be stolen, because it wasn't material. Unless it could only be grasped through understanding. Could the sealed manuscripts have been unreadable to anyone without the right training? Mathematical, symbolic, or even genetic? Could they hold not just knowledge, but instructions, blueprints for energy, consciousness, or technologies from a civilization long erased? One codex rumored to surface in 18th century Prague told of a machine built of wood, crystal, and bronze. It required no fuel, yet thrummed with purpose when aligned with the moon. The book, according to records, was destroyed after its owner fell ill, but what if it wasn't destroyed at all? What if it was simply passed on, sealed again, waiting for the right hands? The idea that ancient knowledge still sleeps in secret archives sounds like myth. But even now, governments, churches, and private collectors lock away forbidden works, texts they fear the world isn't ready for. Could a few of those hidden volumes bear the ink of a Templar scribe? A man who saw something beneath the Temple Mount that shattered his understanding of reality and wrote it down for someone in another age to rediscover? If so, those manuscripts are still here, waiting, not for another crusade or war, but for a reader who can finally see. Because maybe the Temple of Solomon was never just a place of worship. Maybe it was a map of the universe etched in stone. A design so precise, so cosmic, that it didn't honor creation, it mirrored it. And if that's true, then what lies beneath the temple, beneath the cathedrals, and beneath our own history, might not be ruins at all, but instructions. And what if the Templars, during their secret years beneath the Temple Mount, discovered how to read it? That possibility has haunted historians, astronomers, and mystics for centuries. The temple's blueprints, found in fragments across ancient Jewish texts and early Arabic commentaries, speak not just of walls and altars, but of golden ratios, aligned courtyards, and precise distances between chambers. These numbers were not arbitrary. They echoed lunar cycles, solstice positions, even the rising angle of Orion's belt above the eastern horizon. Could the Temple of Solomon have been designed as a giant celestial calendar, a structure that mapped the heavens while anchoring their movements into daily ritual? And if the Templars uncovered remnants of this design, what knowledge might they have carried back to Europe? The Knights were not scholars in the traditional sense. Yet within the order were men trained in geometry, navigation, and astrology with extraordinary precision. After returning to Europe, they sponsored cathedrals whose rose windows mirrored starburst constellations and whose floor plans replicated celestial alignments visible from Jerusalem at specific times of the year. How could warrior monks, barely trained in stonework, suddenly become architects of sky-matching structures? Some theorists propose that Solomon's foundation stones contained a stellar code, angles and coordinates meant to replicate harmony between heaven and earth. References in the Book of Enoch, a text rediscovered centuries later, speak of a heavenly vault built with perfect design. Could the temple have been its earthly mirror? One hidden carving, discovered beneath the abbey at Rennes Chateau, depicts a cube surrounded by 7 stars resembling the Pleiades cluster. Beneath it, in Latin, are the words, "As above, so below." Was this a cryptic reference to Solomon's temple, or a map pointing to something far greater? Could the Pleiades have been the key constellation guiding their reconstructions? Star mapping was not new. The Egyptians aligned pyramids to Sirius and Orion. The Babylonians tracked Venus to mark ritual calendars. But what made Solomon's design unique was its fusion of spatial and spiritual logic, a system that did not merely observe the heavens, but recreated them on earth. Scholars suggest the temple's inner sanctuary mirrored the celestial sphere, each chamber corresponding not just to space, but to time, a star, or a rhythm of cosmic significance. Was the veil before the Holy of Holies more than symbolic? Could it have marked a literal threshold between the known world and a star-mapped realm? And if so, did the Templars discover how to lift it, not with hands, but with mathematics? Ancient Templar diagrams, rare and often dismissed, depict circles intersected by triangles along a single vertical axis. Some view these as spiritual symbols, others as a form of celestial navigation, a way to track not only your location on Earth, but the stars themselves. Could this have been an early model of a stellar grid? A Renaissance-era manuscript, once held by a Templar sympathizer, contains a fold-out of temple measurements converted into degrees of arc, an attempt, perhaps, to link the building's layout with celestial positions on specific days of the year. Was this simply timekeeping, or a system to predict events through cosmic alignment? Much like modern astronomers calculate eclipses, some theorists suggest the Templars believed the temple drew knowledge not from Earth, but from a lost or even extraterrestrial source. Texts from secret Rosicrucian libraries describe the first builder, a being of light said to have laid the temple's geometry to align with Orion, the Pleiades, and Draco. Could this knowledge have been in the scrolls smuggled from beneath the mount? Was Solomon's temple itself a reflection of a structure seen in the heavens, or even another world? Was it designed to receive something at a precise time, angle, or frequency of light and sound? Some propose that this system was not merely architectural, but spiritual. Rituals performed inside such a space may have aligned the body, mind, and spirit with the cosmos. Chants, music, and sacred geometry could have created resonances within the stone and the people, amplifying awareness, focus, and perception. Could the Templars have experimented with this sacred resonance, learning not just to commune with God, but with the rhythms of the stars themselves? If Solomon's temple reflected the heavens, and if the Templars had discovered its keys, then their mission extended far beyond defending pilgrims. It was about reactivating an ancient science, a system bridging astronomy, sound, and architecture into a single, sacred framework. One that allowed humans to step into alignment with the cosmos and, perhaps, touch knowledge lost to time. Whether they succeeded or not, the clues remain, etched in stone, encoded in ratios, preserved in blueprints predating the cathedrals that followed. And so the question lingers, was Solomon's temple merely a holy site, or a celestial machine, a monument designed not just to endure, but to remember? Some whisper of a final, forbidden secret hidden within that design. A name. A word of power, known only to kings and high priests, said to command spirits, seal portals, and open the gates of heaven. Jewish mystics claim Solomon built the temple not only by wisdom, but by speaking this sacred, ineffable word, never written, never spoken aloud. It was said to govern wind, fire, and stone. Could the Templars, in their years beneath the Temple Mount, have uncovered this word? And if they did they fully understand the danger of what they had found? Medieval texts speak of 72 keys, each linked to an angel or spirit, but above all stood the Shem HaMephorash, the explicit name. The name that held the power of the cosmos itself. It was not a word, not a title, not even a sound in any language known to men. It was believed to be the original vibration of creation itself, the voice before language, the resonance that shaped the universe. If the Templars stumbled upon fragments of this knowledge, etched in stone or whispered in scrolls, how might it have reshaped their understanding of religion, power, and danger? For in the wrong hands, such a word could be a weapon rather than a prayer. One Arabic manuscript, discovered centuries later amid the ruins of a Templar outpost near Acre, spoke of a stone beneath the temple's western wall. A name was carved in fire. The text warned, to speak it aloud was to bind the will of heaven, or shatter the mind of man. Was this the unspoken name, or a metaphor for knowledge the Church feared most? Perhaps this is why the Templars, once returned to Europe, adopted the symbols of silence, the finger pressed to the lips, the vow of secrecy. They were not merely guarding relics. They were guarding a sound, a name, a vibration that could not be erased, only buried in silence. In later Templar churches, subtle symbols began appearing, Hebrew letters hidden in arches, stars arranged with impossible precision, inscriptions that even scholars today cannot fully translate. Were these fragments of the name itself scattered to prevent the full sound from ever being spoken? Or protective wards designed to contain a power already unleashed? The fear of the name was universal. In Islamic tradition, only Solomon and a handful of angels could speak it. Christian mystics warned of a voice that bends the mind. Gnostic texts spoke of a vibrational key opening the gates between worlds. Could all these traditions echo one shared truth? A name so ancient and potent it had to be erased from every tongue, yet preserved in stone? Some theorists suggest the Templars did not merely find the name, they attempted to use it. Secret rituals in underground chapels may have sought to invoke or contain its forces. Scholars point to abandoned or ritually sealed sites as evidence of experiments gone wrong. What happened if they spoke it, or succeeded? Could a word of divine origin, uttered by mortal lips, command elements, shift consciousness, even alter reality? Accounts from Templar trials tell of strange phrases whispered under duress, sound scribes could not reproduce. Were these echoes of the name, slipping through, terrifying even the inquisitors? Or were they red herrings, planted to hide a truth too dangerous to record? A few claim the name was never truly spoken, but sung, encoded in harmonic chants or tones activating hidden structures. Rosslyn Chapel, with its musical cubes and resonant architecture, may have been one such vessel. Perhaps the name was not a word at all, but a frequency, felt, not heard. Could sacred sites across Europe still hold that resonance, awaiting the alignment of sound, shape, and intent to awaken it? The idea of a word that shapes creation has long haunted humanity. For the Templars, it could explain both their sudden rise in influence and the ferocity of the crackdown that followed. If they had learned to command not armies, but elements, their threat was existential. The Church feared not heresy, but a human voice speaking with divine authority, or worse, rewriting it. Where did the name go? Some say it was buried with the last Grandmaster. Others argue it lies in plain sight, encoded in geometry, passed on through ritual, waiting for the world to be ready to listen again. But the warnings endure. A word once spoken can shape the stars, or shatter them. Somewhere, in scrolls and stones, it rests, silent, patient, waiting. Some believe the Templars, upon excavating beneath the Temple Mount, encountered more than chambers. They triggered a warning inscribed not in ink, but in fate. Misfortunes followed their path. Architects vanished, entire chapters decimated by sudden illness, fires consumed centuries-old commanderies. Coincidence, or price paid for unsealing knowledge meant to remain buried? Fragments found near the Dead Sea spoke of keepers of the name forbidden to cross the veil. Aramaic texts warned of shadows descending on those who took from the chamber and spoke what was not meant for mortal ears. Were these warnings for Solomon's time, or for those centuries later, beneath European skies? Some letters from 12th century monastic archives hint that the sudden deaths of Templar leaders after Jerusalem's fall were more than political. Tales speak of visions, self-imposed silence, and madness among knights who had labored beneath the temple. Could exposure to something eternal, whether spiritual, symbolic, or physical, have broken their minds? And if so, was this madness punishment, or transformation? A chilling detail recurs in whispers from France and Germany. Those who glimpsed too much, who sought to touch the resonance of the name, often disappeared without trace. A few Templars were said to have carried stones from the Temple Mount chambers back to Europe. Relics they believed would protect their strongholds, but once placed inside chapels or crypts, these stones reportedly brought misfortune, hauntings, collapsed arches, sudden deaths during services. Were these coincidences, or had they brought more than stone across the sea? Even in Rosslyn Chapel, a building steeped in Templar lore, stonemasons spoke of unexplained cold spots, tools vanishing mid-task, and a presence in the unfinished lower chambers that no one dared enter alone. Could the curse have traveled not through the stones themselves, but through memory and imitation? If Solomon's temple was constructed to align with sacred forces, both earthly and divine, then disturbing that balance may have carried consequences. Perhaps by copying its design across cathedrals and commanderies, the Templars spread not just knowledge, but a flawed resonance. Some theorists suggest that the fall of the Templars was more than political betrayal. It may have been the culmination of a curse unfolding over decades. The mass arrests, the tortured confessions, the burning of Jacques de Molay, were these acts of human justice or divine balance? One 14th-century priest recorded that de Molay whispered a phrase in his final hours, never translated. Those who heard it reportedly died within weeks. A name? A confession? A curse sent back to its source? In Masonic lore, there is mention of the Builder's Curse, a warning that sacred geometry, when learned without spiritual readiness, can misalign the soul. The Templars, though disciplined and devoted, were still human. Could the knowledge they unearthed have exposed them to forces beyond their preparation? A forgotten document, locked in the Vatican archives, reportedly mentions a mark of error placed upon the order shortly before its dissolution. Scholars speculate it could refer to heretical teachings, or perhaps a literal sign seen among the knights. Was it a spiritual stain, setting them apart in the eyes of the divine? Some believe the curse was one of silence. The greatest torment was to carry a vision too vast and destabilizing to share, bound by secrecy until death. Could truth, when misused, curse its bearer? Across Europe, signs of fear remain. Templar graves disturbed, symbols scratched away, names erased from stone. These were not acts of dishonor, but of dread, an effort to sever the living connection to what they had found, or perhaps to contain the curse itself. Long before Columbus set sail, whispers spoke of a different journey, one across the Atlantic, not driven by gold, but by secrecy and the need to preserve sacred knowledge. Carvings predated European arrival: stars, circles, compasses, keys, symbols echoing Templar rituals. Some etched at precise angles tied to solstice points, others arranged to mimic patterns from Solomon's temple floor plans. Could Templar survivors have sailed to the Americas, carrying relics, books, and a message they barely understood? Evidence, though fragmentary, hints at their presence. The Bat Creek stone in West Virginia bears characters resembling ancient Semitic writing. In Brazil, stone crosses and ruined towers mirror medieval European construction. Native oral traditions from northeastern woodlands speak of pale travelers arriving with books, tools, and a message they could not fully convey. Could these be echoes of Templars transporting something sacred across the sea, too powerful to leave behind? Some researchers believe the Templars carried maps far older than their age, charts copied from scrolls beneath Solomon's temple. These were not merely geographic maps, but blueprints of energy, currents, and lines connecting earth to sky. Ley lines, star paths, sacred alignments, guides for where to build, where the earth itself would amplify the heavens. Perhaps the Americas were seen as a blank page, a place to continue their work in secret. In Newport, Rhode Island, a stone tower remains a puzzle. Circular, precisely constructed, with window placements echoing Templar round churches in Europe, some call it the Templar Tower. Was it a relic of their secret voyage? If so, why here, tucked away, unclaimed, invisible to the world? Further north, Oak Island in Nova Scotia fuels legend. Digging there has revealed more than gold. Wooden platforms laid at precise intervals, stone markers arranged in triangles, inscriptions resembling ancient Coptic and Hebrew. Were these attempts to recreate sacred geometry in a new land a continuation of a mission that began beneath the Temple Mount? Or were they simply the echoes of a curse, moving with the stones, the maps, and the secrets the Templars carried across the sea? Could Oak Island and others like it have been repositories not of gold, but of knowledge smuggled out of the old world? And if so, who buried it? The pattern stretches southward. In Mexico, a cathedral built atop an ancient indigenous temple bears geometric designs echoing early Templar structures. In Peru, cross-shaped caves mirror the floor plans used for Templar underground chambers. Scholars often dismiss these parallels as coincidence or later influence. But what if they were deliberate? Could these sites mark a quiet migration of builders and guardians, choosing remote places to preserve a legacy rooted in Solomon's hidden teachings? Perhaps they were signals, lighthouses for those able to decode the symbols and recognize the pattern centuries later. Some theories suggest that Templar voyages across the Atlantic were guided not just by wind and stars, but by instruments older than their order, a compass built along the principles of Solomon's Temple. Records mention a needle that bows only to God, a stone that hums when placed upon sacred land. Were these mere poetic metaphors or hints of lost technology, tools designed to detect places of energy and resonance, guiding the Templars to sites aligned with the frequencies they once guarded in Jerusalem? Freemasons later claimed that early lodges in the New World followed these builders' lines, linking Europe to the Americas through city after city, lodge after lodge. Was this line literal or spiritual, a memory of a geometric inheritance traced back to the Temple Mount itself? Today, such ideas remain speculative, but the symbols are real. The carvings exist. The architecture stands. The stories passed down through Masons, tribes, and quiet orders continue to hint at truths too complex to dismiss. Could the New World have been chosen not for conquest, but for safekeeping, a place to preserve ancient knowledge free from kings, popes, and inquisitions, waiting for the moment to rise again? Across stone towers, buried vaults, carved stars, and compass roses, a singular idea emerges. Perhaps the true treasure of Solomon's Temple was not objects, names, or bloodlines, but the temple itself as a pattern. Some suggest it was a code not meant to be read like a book, but felt as a frequency. Ancient sources describe it not simply as a house of worship, but as a machine of alignment. Its layout, proportions, and materials mirrored the universe's deepest structures. Could Solomon's architects have encoded truths about space, sound, and human consciousness into stone? Templars digging beneath the Temple Mount may have uncovered this pattern. Biblical descriptions speak not just of construction, but of cubits, angles, gold ratios, and astonishing symmetry. Overlaid onto geometric forms, these measurements reveal exact matches with the flower of life, the golden mean, and other symbols later linked to sacred geometry. Could the temple's designs have been functional, focused to unlock energy? Much like Stonehenge or the pyramids, the temple may have interacted with natural forces. Hebrew texts describe sound moving through stone, like wind through trees, suggesting the structure channeled vibrations. Rituals performed within may have been amplified by the architecture itself, affecting consciousness, opening visions, or inspiring insight. The temple, in this reading, was more than a house for God. It was a map for reaching Him. The Templars, trained as warrior monks, may have recognized these signs. They encountered Islamic architecture rich with mathematical symbolism, Hebrew texts filled with ratios, and Greek writings on divine proportion. After their return, their own buildings changed. Round churches, labyrinthine cathedrals, spiral staircases, echoing the ratios of Solomon's sanctuary. By recreating the temple in stone, could they have preserved the knowledge they uncovered? Some believe the Templars discovered a secret ratio embedded in the temple's design, a ratio appearing in biology, light, and atomic structures. Some call it the divine scale. It appears in the spacing of Rosslyn Chapel, the layout of Chartres Cathedral, and even in the curves of the DNA double helix. Could it represent a universal truth linking human consciousness to the stars, sound, and the cosmos itself? One French carving shows a Templar kneeling within a triangle, surrounded by concentric circles. Some claim it depicts meditation, others, a blueprint. When measured, the dimensions translate into sequences found in quantum equations and soundwave patterns. Could this suggest that the Templars preserved advanced knowledge, not just relics, but codes of vibration and resonance? And if knowledge can be encoded in ratios and shapes, could those codes still resonate today? Modern physics speaks of resonance, that objects, even minds, can sync to specific frequencies. What if the Templars' sacred architecture was designed not just to endure, but to awaken something in those who enter it, a hidden song from the stones themselves? What if Solomon's Temple was designed not merely to house worship, but to resonate with the earth itself, its magnetic field, the human nervous system, even the hidden structures of space-time? In that case, the temple was a bridge, a place where heaven and earth could be tuned to the same note. Perhaps the Grail was never a cup at all, but a state of being unlocked through sacred architecture. Some whisper that this is why the Vatican fought so fiercely to suppress Templar knowledge. If people realized that geometry could alter awareness, that buildings themselves could awaken insight, then religion would no longer be confined to books or altars. It would become something tangible, something you could walk into, feel, and experience. A Templar scroll discovered in southern Italy mentions the shape that opens, interlocking triangles and circles meant to be constructed in stone. Scholars debate whether this was an early cathedral design or a coded key to unlock memory, energy, or even perception of time. Certain cathedrals influenced by Templar design reportedly produce sensations of lightness, clarity, or overwhelming emotion when standing in precise geometric centers during equinoxes. Were these merely side effects or intended experiences? If the Templars understood that Solomon's temple was a gateway, perhaps they spent centuries trying to recreate it, not to worship within, but to activate it. And perhaps they succeeded, not once, but many times. Across Europe, cathedrals, chapels, and towers carry hints of this sacred geometry: golden ratios, mirrored symmetry, sun-path alignments, spiral acoustics. Could this web of structures form a circuit, a network designed to preserve a forgotten pattern? By the time the last Templar Grandmaster was burned at the stake in the early 14th century, their public story had ended, but their silence marked a turning, not a conclusion. Their names were stripped from records. Buildings were seized or destroyed. Symbols were condemned as heresy. Yet echoes of their presence lingered, in architecture, folklore, and ritual. Could the real legacy of the Templars have survived not through open rebellion, but through quiet transformation? Across Europe, as the Church tightened its grip, new groups emerged: craft guilds, stonemasons, and philosophical societies that spoke a language older than their own founding dates. Symbols tied to Solomon's temple: the compass, the square, the all-seeing eye, the twin pillars named Jachin and Boaz, appear not as decoration but as part of a coded system. Initiations, degrees, and rituals mirrored the ancient knowledge the Templars once protected. The rise of Freemasonry offers clues. Though public records appear much later, their oldest rites are full of temple references. Initiates are guided through allegories of Solomon's builders, taught to seek light through order and measure, and to protect the secrets of the craft with their lives. One degree speaks of a lost word, another, a buried treasure of wisdom to be restored by a future generation. Where did these ideas come from? Why do they so closely mirror Templar beliefs? Some suggest that fleeing Templars embedded their knowledge into the stonemason guilds of Scotland and France, where secrecy was already part of the trade. Certain families, like the Sinclairs of Rosslyn, may have served as bridges between the dying order and the rising craft, carrying not just bloodlines but blueprints, rituals, and the vision of a sacred order beyond the reach of the Church. Could this explain why Freemasons place such emphasis on Solomon's temple, even as its full meaning remains elusive? Even under the Church's control, these symbols slipped through. Cathedrals built by anonymous masons display perfect geometric layouts, rose windows reflecting sacred proportions, carvings of men with tools, scrolls, and stars. They were messengers, hiding fragments of a silenced truth. While the Church condemned Templar heresies, it often absorbed their legacy in private, repurposing buildings, co-opting architecture, and adopting symbols in secret. Could some popes have built palaces atop old Templar strongholds, not to claim victory, but to honor a power they could not destroy? The trail stretches across borders: Spain, Portugal, even the Americas. Symbols tied to the Templars appear on mission walls, colonial seals, and legal documents, not random flourishes, but patterns preserved like whispers passed hand to hand. Some researchers argue this was deliberate, a dispersed, fragmented legacy, hidden in professions and oaths, waiting for the right eyes to recognize it. Builders, masons, and philosophers may have carried pieces of a worldview rooted in Solomon's temple, a system blending sacred geometry, divine proportion, and spiritual discipline. A strange detail appears again and again: veiled language. Instead of naming Solomon, texts speak of the first master. Jerusalem becomes the Eastern Light. These euphemisms appear in Freemason rituals and early Rosicrucian tracts. Perhaps the core ideas survived, but only in shadow. And somewhere, inside ceremonial halls, forgotten vaults, and secret societies, remnants of Templar rituals may still exist. Copies of scrolls, diagrams of temple layouts, and accounts of the Knights' discoveries may yet be waiting for the world to awaken to their resonance. Could the real secret be that the knowledge never left, only changed its name? That the builders of cathedrals, temples, and even nations drew from a hidden wellspring older than any flag or creed? The Templars may have been erased from the Church's ledgers, but their echoes remained, carved in stone, sung through symbols, and whispered from generation to generation. Their story didn't end at the stake. It simply stepped into the shadows, waiting for those with the tools to uncover it. In Solomon's temple, there was a chamber so sacred that only one man could enter it once a year, and only after purification. It was called the Holy of Holies, a room said to hold the Ark of the Covenant and the very presence of the divine. But what if that chamber held more than relics of belief? What if the Templars, digging beneath the Temple Mount, reached that final space, untouched by centuries, sealed by time, and saw something that rewrote everything they thought they knew? Some say they found nothing. Others say they found too much. Legends across Masonic texts, Islamic traditions, and hidden gospels all speak of a moment when the Templars stood in darkness beneath stone older than Jerusalem itself, and discovered an object, or perhaps a truth, not meant to be carried into the world above. What could that truth have been? Could it be that the Holy of Holies did not contain the Ark, but a record, a crystalline tablet, a device, or even a map, not of land but of human origin? A voice that writes, a name that breathes, a pattern of creation burned into gold. Could the Templars have found not proof of God, but proof of something before God as we understand him? Something so old, so powerful, it threatened every version of truth the Church sought to preserve? Some say that after the discovery, the earliest Templars changed. They stopped calling themselves warriors and began calling themselves guardians. They stopped recruiting. They stopped building. They simply stayed beneath the temple, studying, recording, guarding. But what did they see? Could they have found evidence of an ancient civilization, one that predated Israel, Egypt, even Sumer? A civilization that encoded its knowledge not in words, but in structure and sound. Could the Holy of Holies have been its last surviving vault? Later Templar writings speak in riddles, of the center that does not move and the eye that sees but cannot be seen. They describe a place or an object that projected knowledge without words, something that showed the truth of human history in an instant. And with it, the realization that everything above, every crown, every church, every empire, was built upon a story that wasn't entirely true. Could this be why the Templars changed course? Why they grew distant from Rome? Why they began to move in patterns too large to trace, building cathedrals, founding banks, preserving codes in stone? Perhaps this was their rebellion, not out of greed or heresy, but out of duty to a truth that could not be spoken. If the Templars found a device, a relic, or a record beneath the temple, they didn't bring it into the world, they hid it. Some believe it was smuggled out aboard the Templar fleet that vanished in the early 14th century. Others say it was buried again far from Jerusalem, sealed within another structure only the initiated could find. There are whispers of a vault beneath Rosslyn, a sealed chamber in Ethiopia, even a mountain in North America where the very geometry of the stone mirrors the temple's design. Could the secret have been moved from holy ground to hollow ground, watched over by generations sworn not to reveal, but to wait? Perhaps the most chilling theory is that the Templars didn't just find a secret, they activated it. That the Holy of Holies was not a vault, but a trigger. A beacon. A threshold that responds only when the right frequency, geometry, or presence is near. If so, then it was never just about guarding the past, it was about preparing for the future. Some claim that the final words of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, were not a curse but a code. Within them a date, a cycle, a signal. Could there be a time when the secret must be revealed, when the pattern must be completed? And if so, are we nearing that moment now? The Vatican keeps sealed archives no scholar may open. Governments quietly monitor old Templar sites. Certain blueprints remain classified, protected under the guise of security. But what if the danger isn't to people? What if it's to power? Could this be why the Templars were hunted, erased, condemned? Not for what they did, but for what they knew. The Holy of Holies was more than a room. It was the axis of an ancient worldview, the final point in a system connecting heaven, earth, and what came before. If the Templars saw it, touched it, understood it, then they carried with them the one thing empires fear most, a truth too vast to control. That is the final secret, that the temple was not merely a place, but a message. That history itself was rewritten to protect those in power. And that somewhere, buried in stone or sealed in symbol, the original page still waits, to be read not by kings or priests, but by those brave enough to see without fear.